So let's finish it out, Dalton, with our interior offensive line ranking. So combining the guards and centers in this draft, what is your top 5 right now?
All right, so I've got the easy one first, Jackson Powers Johnson, no question. Best center in the country, Remington, best interior offensive lineman in the country, dominated the Senior Bowl. Just no question here about the first spot, possibly a top 20 pick. I think you and I both agreed that Graham Barton, we're going to count him here as an interior offensive lineman, and I don't mind it at all, especially just to get his name on the board. You see the way, so he's got experience at center, good experience at center. And even at left tackle, Duke the last 2 years started doing things with him that really translate. Graham Barton's an excellent athlete, okay? And they started pulling him a lot. And when you talk about those two things, and he was a really effective puller, he understands angles, especially in the zone game. He's really good in space. He's, I think, actually the single most versatile offensive lineman in this draft. I think Graham Barton could succeed to some level at any of the 5 spots on the offensive line. So I know a lot of people are projecting him to play inside, center, maybe. I think he could play guard. I think the two flaws with him are power rushes, and when you watch probably at least 80% of the time that he got beaten pass protection was to the inside. So I think he does need to get a little bit stronger, especially if he's going to play guard instead of center. But the athleticism, I think, for him holds up at all 5 positions. Yep. I still think he should get a shot to play tackle.
Same.
Really do.
Yeah.
I think if there's a late round team that wants a left tackle or even a right tackle, he's a really, really good tackle. First off, he's got, his tape at center is solid, and that was as a freshman. Barton's the most versatile lineman in this draft. I really like him, especially we've talked before about the fit in San Francisco. If they were to get him, it's perfect. It's just perfect because they can put him anywhere they need to put him. Third, I have Zach Frazier from West Virginia. He's been moving up. He's really aggressive. He wants to put you on the sled and hurt you. He does. It's just really aggressive, kind of that anchor center. It's not like Jason Kelsey or a guy like that who's moving around, flying all over the place doing that. It's more of a classic anchor center. I think better in gap scheme, and I think he's better the closer that guys are to him in the A gaps. I think that's when he's better. He wants to get his hands on somebody and put him on the sled. He's a former wrestler. He wants to be really, really physical. I think he's a guy that Buffalo too. I think that they're picking at 26 or 27, wherever they're picking. I think it'd be a perfect replacement for Mitch Morse. They don't really have a starting caliber center right now. The more I watched Frazier, the more I went Buffalo Bills. Put him in front of Josh Allen, get the gap scheme stuff and all the power and everything they've got going, and just let him maul people in that cold weather in Buffalo. Number 4, I'll tell you what, the more I watch Christian Haynes from UConn, the more I love him. Mm-hmm. Wow. The same athleticism as Barton, but Haynes is just a guard. Okay, so just not as versatile, but man, I'm going to tell you something. Christian Haynes can really, really move. And I talk about understanding angles and where to put his helmet in the zone game. Any of the teams in the back end of the second round that need O-line help at guard, Miami, Green Bay, Philadelphia, if they move Juergens to center, San Francisco. I think there's going to be 5 or 6 teams in the back half of the second round. They're going to be killing to have Christian Haynes. He's an immediate starter. Like if Miami got him to replace Robert Hunt, who they just lost in free agency, home run, absolute home run, really wicked athlete. And his grade profile, it looked like it dropped down a little bit this year. And honestly, that was only because of one really bad game against James Madison, who was fantastic. It was the worst game of his career. Otherwise, Christian Haynes is the same guy, and he's wicked athletic every week. And 5th for me is Cooper Beebe. I think he's just different. I could flip-flop him or Haynes either way, honestly. I think it's a style thing. Beebe's got a little more just straight-line power. But he's versatile. I'll tell you what, he can play tackle in a pinch. He was really good at tackle for Kansas State. He was the best guard in the country for the last 2 years. Yep. Those are just, especially in pass protection. He's so consistent in pass protection that I don't see how Cooper Beebe should get out of the second round either. I really don't. I texted you the stat yesterday when I was looking at it. For his career at Kansas State, when he lined up at guard, his grade was 83.3. When he lined up at tackle, his grade was 83.1. He's just a friggin' football player. Yep. Honestly, Cooper Beebe is just so reliable. I remember even back in the day of I think about Gabe Jackson was taken in the second round, and everyone knew. They were just he's probably not an all-pro, but he's a starter. There's no way he's not. And I think Cooper Beebe, especially with the floor he gives you in pass protection, he's been the best pass protector in the country for the last 3 years.
Yep.
If you take any of the offensive line spot, it's just crazy how good I think a 94.8 pass blocking grade or something I found. It's nuts how good he is. So I think Cooper Beebe's an easy second-round pick, and I could flip-flop him or Haynes 4 and 5 and wouldn't have an issue.
I'm glad you agree with me, Dalton, because we actually have the same players in the top 5, just different order. Number 1, easily, Jackson Powers-Johnson to Oregon. I think you mentioned he's the best center in college football this past year. I believe he led the nation in both pass blocking and run blocking grade, which is pretty rare for a player. He is fantastic. Also, guard versatility, too. He had an 80-plus graded guard last year for Oregon. So, obviously, he doesn't have he can't really play tackle, obviously, but if you need him to play guard or center, I mean, he could do either. So, I think Jackson Powers-Johnson is going to be a first-round pick, and he was fantastic this past season. Graham Barton at number 2. I put him at number 2 because I think he's got that tackle versatility, and he was elite at left tackle for Duke. You mentioned he could play center, could play guard, where you might play in the NFL as well. Play all 5 positions on the offensive line, man, and that's going to be really, really valuable. I love the 49ers fit for him, too, because I think that really is a great spot for him, and a team that really just needs offensive linemen in general. Having a guy who can play all 5 positions at probably a high level is really valuable. So Graham Barton at number 2, great interview. If you want to check out that interview with him, we did last year. One of my favorite interviews I've ever done, Dalton, was number 3, Cooper Beebe from Kansas State. And I'm happy that you're with me, man, because I think this guy is getting criminally slept on in the NFL draft process right now. Actually, a funny story Cooper Beebe I want to put out from the interview. He was thinking about going to Kansas, and he and his dad visited Kansas together. And they knew one of the coaches there. And Cooper was like, hey, I'm thinking about committing here. And the coach was like, don't commit here. We're all getting fired after the season's over. And Cooper was like, oh, okay. So then they did get fired, and obviously brought in Lance Leipold, and they've done a great job since. And Cooper went to Kansas State, did an awesome job there. He mentioned how he wanted to go back to Kansas State, get in the Ring of Honor, and become, and I think he has to become a consensus All-American to do that, and he did that this past year. Fantastic player, elite pass blocker, elite run blocker. You mentioned, dude, the versatility he had. I mean, he played tackle for Kansas State, didn't allow a sack, and tackle and guard, didn't allow a sack for like 3 years in a row, man. It was absolutely absurd. Great run blocker, too. And the number one thing that's talked about with Cooper Beebe and why people see him as a day 3 prospect is, well, he's not an elite athlete. BS, he's not an elite athlete. He tested out as a 93rd percentile athlete in the relative athletic score. So that you could throw that out the window. Cooper Beebe is a fantastic football player who's an elite athlete. For me, there are very little concerns with him at the NFL level. So I do not agree with at all the concerns of the athletic limitations, because he tested out the combine as one of the best athletes at the guard position. So he is a fantastic player. I have him as number 3. Zach Frazier, I have at number 4. Love him at center. He's been a great center for West Virginia. I think you mentioned it great. The wrestling background clearly shows up with him. He's a mean player, and I love that in interior offensive lineman, so I love him there. And at number 5, I have Christian Haynes from UConn, who, again, really good player at UConn the past couple of years, has been one of the better guards in the country over the past couple of years at both pass blocking and run blocking. He's a really good athlete as well, tested out in the 92nd percentile for athleticism score. I love Christian Haynes as well. I think all 5 of these guys, you can make an argument, should be second-round picks, honestly. I mean, they are all very talented football players. But who is the sleeper that you're kind of keeping an eye on right now in the interior offensive line class right now, Dalton?
I'm going deep here. And this guy who stuck out to me because of his grade profile. Let's get Miami's Matt Lee, the center from Miami. Spent 4 years at UCF and then this past year at Miami. Really, over the last 3 years, Max, at center, you look in this class and you look at pass block grade, and it's Jackson Powers-Johnson, and then it's Matt Lee, second. He's one of the best pass protectors in this class. He's a little bit small. He's not like a dominant run blocker by any means. Probably, again, better in that zone scheme where you can kind of work angles instead of brute force, right? But he led the nation in true pass block grade this past season down there at Miami after a couple of years at UCF and Gus Malzahn's offense, where he can hide a little bit. He had really good grades, but it was some things that he was slowly getting better at. But he was, other than Powers-Johnson, you could argue he was the best pass pro center in the country this past year. Now, I went back looking for guys who kind of fit this profile of like centers who are better pass blockers than run blockers. It was hard to find a comp for Lee. There's some guys who are close. There's like Eric McCoy and Cesar Ruiz, who both play for the Saints now. Sam Mustipher, who's been around, bounced around. Bradley Bozeman, who's been a solid player, Baltimore and Carolina. I think he's with the Chargers now, back with Greg Roman. Like, there are guys who comp and have been and are solid football players right now. It's a really weird profile and not one you see very often at center, because like the best players at center we generally think of are the run blockers, right? The Tyler Linderbaums and John Michael Schmitz and the one for the Cowboys, but Travis Frederick, that's the name I was thinking of. They've had so many linemen from Wisconsin, but it's a weird profile, but I think it's one I would take like probably a 6th-round chance on, just based on, again, the pass pro floor it's just so important. Pass protection, you've seen, last year, like even there's probably 5 or 6 teams in the NFL that just couldn't function at all because they couldn't pass protect. So if I'm looking for a guy like that at center, I might look at Matt Lee from Miami.